esteemed panel who will each introduce themselves as they speak. You all saw the flyer and you all saw a little bit about what they're talking about, but they're really here to be a resource for all of us as we think through many things in the life planning arena and how you think through that yourselves. There is some paperwork over here from some of the panelists. If you leave here and you've forgotten how to get to somebody, don't hesitate to contact me. My card and our current endowment report is there. But if we could start by just thanking, we're going to start an evening of gratitude and thank our panelists. Thank you, Jan. Would you give, thank you, Mary. Thank you, Lynn. Thank you, Andy. And thank you, Jan. All right, and then Reverend Dan, if you'll begin our evening in prayer.
Let's go ahead and pray. Gracious Lord, we thank you for stopping the snow so that we could get here safe and sound this evening and that the weather wouldn't be a factor as to why people could or could not make it. We pray that your Holy Spirit would be present as we talk tonight and plan for the future and for generations to come. As we look to the way that you have blessed us and then, as the scriptures tell us, how we've been blessed to then be a blessing so that we might make a difference for the generations who come after us. But Lord, we pray that we feel your presence. We pray that you guide our words and our discussions, and we pray that when we leave, you would give us safe traveling mercies to get back home to the ones we love and that love us so much. Bless our time together, Lord. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
All right, so we are not mic'd. If you are having a hard time hearing us, please just raise your hand and we'll know that we need to speak up. I think we all are able to have our voices carry the room, but if not, please let us know because we want you to be informed and then might know what questions you want to ask us later on. So my name is Reverend Dan Bogre. I'm the senior pastor here at Rocky River United Methodist Church. I've been here 13 years. I've been in full-time Christian ministry for 29 years now, and so obviously, and I will say this, I've been blessed to preside over many funerals, memorial services, graveside committal services, and I do mean that it's been an honor and a privilege and a blessing. We say here at our church it's all about the story. We exist to help people meet Christ in the midst of their story, and when a family invites me to come alongside them in their most difficult time, it is an honor and a privilege. And as I look around this room, I've been with many of you through those difficult times, and thank you for that opportunity. So in many ways that people find themselves either prepared or unprepared financially when they lose a loved one or their loved one dies and they say, oh my gosh, we didn't plan. I hear a lot of that as well when it comes to planning the funeral service, memorial service, celebration of life, whatever you want to call it. So I'll get a call from somebody that this person passed, and if it's someone from the church, it's a blessing because I already know something about them. I have something about their story, but sometimes I'll get someone who says, can you do my Uncle Joe's funeral? He died and he didn't have a church. So no matter who I meet with, I have three initial questions that I ask everyone I meet with to help me paint either a picture or a better picture of their loved one. And if you have these ahead of time, it can help you and it can help me, because my goal, when my grandmother died and the clergy person that did her funeral forgot her name during the service. And he had to go grab a bulletin to remember her name. So I promised God and everyone that I presided over a funeral from now on, I will not only remember your name, but I will know that person as well as I can, and everyone that's come to be at the funeral service will feel like I knew that person their entire life. So I asked three questions that help paint that picture. So if I'm using Uncle Joe as a reference, I say to the family, what made Uncle Joe Uncle Joe? What I mean by that, what made him laugh? What made him cry? What were his hobbies? What were his interests? What was he passionate about? What were holidays like? Was he the comedian at the Christmas party, or was he the one that did all the cooking? So the first question is, what was Uncle Joe like? And then fill in the blank and just tell me those stories. And every time I meet with families, they end up laughing and crying at the same time when they tell those stories. And they build off of each other. The whole family's sitting in the room. Second question I ask is, what life lessons live on in you because of Uncle Joe. Because of who that person was in your life, that is now some of the things that you've taken into your life that Uncle Joe was passionate about. Education, about putting others first, about their faith, whatever it might be. When you tell me that this is important to you because of Uncle Joe, you're painting a picture of who he was and how he lived his life. That's number 2, what life lessons. Number 3 is tell me about Uncle Joe's faith. And I don't necessarily mean church attendance, because a lot of people immediately say, oh, he didn't go to church. So I say, I have a pretty good feeling you know some of the tenets of the Christian faith: love, forgiveness, serving others. How did Uncle Joe live the tenets of the Christian faith in the way that he lived his life? It might be church attendance, serving on the trustees, was an usher, went to the food kitchen, whatever it might be. But how did Uncle Joe then live those characteristics in his life? By the time we're done talking, I know Uncle Joe, and I know the stories, and they become part of the message on the day of their funeral. The other thing I would tell you in advance, if you're planning your own or your loved one, what Holy Scriptures are special to you? Do you have Bible scriptures that you love? Tell someone that you know, or tell me, so that when it comes time to plan your service, and I say, do they have? I mean, I can always suggest some, but if you have some, then I know why they're meaningful to you. So if you have some, write them down, give them to someone you know, or meet with me. I have a folder in my office of families that I met with. Their entire service is planned. And then lastly, if you have hymns or songs or things that were special to you, we're playing, I have a funeral on Saturday, and they want to finish with What a Wonderful World by Louis Armstrong. So they don't have to be church hymns per se. I mean, I do draw a line at certain songs, but if it's a church service. But if you know them already, tell somebody. Make it easier on your loved ones so that they know, oh, Dad loved Amazing Grace. Or Mom loved And He Walked With Me. Or In the Garden, I mean. So if you have those, put those together. And I want to honor your time. Lastly, know that it's your service. It's your service. I will come into our meeting with a general outline of how a service flows, but by no means does it have to stay that way. It's just so we have a starting point. If you want to turn it around, add stuff, take stuff away, then do that. It's your service. I don't care how long it goes. I don't care how many people speak at it. It's your service. So please remember that as you come into it. And then, I'm sorry, one last thing. If you know you're going to have, if you think you want to have people speak at your funeral service, let them know ahead of time. Like, tell them now, hey, I'm hoping it's down the road, but I really would love for you to speak at my funeral service. Then they know ahead of time, and they're not put on the spot 3 days before that event. So that's a quick snapshot of a really special process when people let me come alongside them during a very difficult time. And I just want to thank those of you in the room. I see that you're here. I've done some of your funeral services for your family. Thank you for that honor and privilege, and I do mean that. And then we'll continue on down the panel, and then we're going to do a time of questions and answers at the end. Thank you for your time.
So my name is Mary Gigante. I'm an attorney, and I do a lot of estate planning and probate work. And so I think highlight a couple things for you to consider and think about, but really I'll save a lot of remarks for any questions that you have, because estate planning isn't a one-size-fits-all. It's very personal with what your goals and objectives are. And it's also a gift that you're giving to the family, because if you get things organized for your family, legal documents in place, then it makes the grieving process for them a lot easier, because now they're not dealing with a mess. And they don't want to have a legal mess, they don't want to have a financial mess. And so there are some pretty key documents that everybody should have. And the first ones are really during your lifetime. If you were ever to become incapacitated, you should absolutely have a durable power of attorney, which is for finances. and you should also have a healthcare power of attorney. Without those documents, if you become incapacitated, then you have to go through the court system to have a guardianship established for you. And that is a very difficult and sometimes very emotionally charged type of process to go through, where families can get into disagreements about it. So please do your families a favor and get those documents in place. I have on the table the state of Ohio healthcare documents. It includes the healthcare power of attorney, a living will, and a donor form. And then I also have the statutory durable power of attorney form back there for you to take if you don't have those. In addition, a lot of people try and organize their assets and make sure that they're going to who they want to go through wills or trusts. And so a lot of people want to try and avoid the probate process. So what is probate? Well, probate is where you have assets in your name alone with no beneficiaries when you pass. And so we need the court system to give us authority to transfer those assets to your beneficiaries. If you have a beneficiary designation, if you have things titled transfer on death or payable on death, those go outside of probate, so those go outside of a will. Bank accounts that you may own jointly with somebody, those would go to the survivor, and so those would go outside of probate as well. So you can actually organize your assets in a way without using a trust to avoid probate. A lot of times, what ends up going through probate for people that have tried to avoid it would be maybe minor bank accounts they didn't think about, U.S. savings bonds that are in their name alone, cars that don't have beneficiary designations. So those are all assets that you can certainly look at and see how they're titled or if you have beneficiaries on them. And then people will also look at trusts, and there's all kinds of trusts that you can establish. There's what's called irrevocable trusts, which are the ones that are written in stone that you can't change once you put them in place. There's revocable trusts, which are trusts that you can change at any time. And they all have different purposes based upon what your goals and objectives are. But those can be used to help, again, order your assets, transfer your assets, maybe help children or grandchildren if they need some assistance in managing those assets down the road. Trusts can be held in place for them. Some people will do trusts to organize their assets and protect them from creditors. Some people will set up trusts to do some Medicaid planning. So there's lots of reasons to do trusts, and again, depending upon what your goals and objectives are, you would use a different type of trust. So there's a lot of planning that can go into place, but again, once you have it all organized and once you have your assets titled properly, you're making it very easy on the family to get things to where you want them to go in a very cost-effective and typically tax-efficient manner. And so you're not going to leave anybody with a mess. And so that's really what I like to do. I don't necessarily like to do the mess side of things because that gets very stressful. I like to do the planning side where we can help people make sure that things go very smoothly. And so that's what I would just encourage all of you to think about is how are things titled, how are things done, and when's the last time I've looked at these documents, because things change and your relationships change, and so maybe you want to update some things. And so I would just maybe, if it's been a while, pull those documents out and just make sure that they're doing and saying exactly what you want them to say.
My name is Lynn Gorton. Many of you know me. I have been lay minister here, but today I'm I wear a lot of hats, as a lot of you know. I am the healthcare professional here. I've been honored about 3 years ago. This September I will have joined the staff here. And mine is a little bit different than what the rest of the panel is. I'm actually one of the hand holders. So what's basically going on for me is I have a passion to walk people through life. So I'm a mind, body, spirit person. So when I go and I see some of our congregants or some of my patients, basically I go to them and I work with them, discuss with them how they're doing physically. I help them throughout what they need with their medical team. If they can't understand their medications, I go over all their meds, and then we make sure that all of those are appropriate. Are they taking the right dosage? All of these things, that's for their body. We make sure that I encourage exercise and things that they need at end of life as well. And then I do mind, where we sit and we talk a lot about how they're doing emotionally. That would mean whether they come into my office or one of you guys give me a call and I'm going to meet you for coffee and we're going to just sit down and ask what's going on right now. Is somebody having a problem in your family? Or how can I walk the walk with you there? And then of course finally spiritually, that's where I go and I do a lot of conversation and we just sit down and talk about how people are doing and I pray with them. There's just so much that I work with. I do a lot of grief counseling for those people that have lost people or are on a grieving track. Some people in our congregation, I know you may not be aware, but people lose people or live in a chronic setting of grief. And it's very hard to live life when you live that way. So one of the reasons that Reverend Dan hired me is to just be available. One of the big things I've done recently is if patients are starting to get very ill and their family members give me a call, I work with them with their LTAC, which is long-term assisted livings. And what do we do there? How can we place people? Can I go there and give them communion? How can I help them maneuver through all of these different things medically? What happens is a lot of people don't recognize that since I was a case manager for so many years, I have the availability to contact people that I can bring people for you. All right, I've got a lot of people in my back pocket that I worked with for many years. I was a case manager. Now, one more thing I really wanted to bring up is when people are getting older, and as we all are, I say that's that three-letter word that none of us like to hear, age, okay? We don't like that. But as we age, we tend to forget that there's different identities, okay? We've lost a lot of our old identity. We used to work somewhere, and that was our identity. And whether you're a male or a female, the roles change, and it's hard. And so that's when you come in and we visit and we talk about how can I help you walk the walk. Not only that, but then there are people that need to get referred. So whether it's a person that's a counselor that I would send you to, or spiritual advisor, or for people that really can't get through their grief. So that's some of the major things that I do. You know, I think it's important that we have good listening. Listening, we forget, is so important. We need validation of where we are. And as we age, we don't even know where we are at times. And that's when you come in and sit down and chat. So what I want you to remember that communion, conversation, and connection to Christ is often how we make it. My life verse myself is, I am the Lord's servant. Okay, that's Luke 1:38. God's placed me in here to help you ride the roller coaster. So having me help you make your own plans, you're in the comfort of your own church. So I have a card over there. Feel free to let me know. I work very closely with Reverend Dan and Pastor Paul on the pastoral care team. I'd love to help you.
Hi, my name is Andy Henton. I'm a CPA and a CFP, Certified Financial Planner. I'm president of Henton Associates. Name is obviously mine. So I do a lot of tax advising for a lot of clients. We do a lot of tax preparation work as well. And I always tell my clients, during their working years, there's only so many things I can do. I can help you save money in taxes by the way you save and different things of that nature. But when you go into retirement or getting close to retirement, that's where I always tell folks, that's where I earn my keep. Because you've saved in many different ways when you're in your working years. You might have just saved some money and put it into a checking account. You might have saved some money and bought some stocks or CDs or bonds. You might have put monies into a retirement accounts. There might have been into annuities. All these different vehicles in which you have put the monies into for your retirement have different tax consequences on when those monies are taken out during retirement or to the next generation. And so there's been a lot of big changes that have come across the last couple of years. The first one is required minimum distributions. These are, monies that once you hit a certain age in retirement, you're forced to take monies out of retirement accounts. Retirement accounts would be in like IRAs, 401ks, and 403bs. And so they put a lot of stress on retirees because you might not need the money, these required minimum distributions might put you in a higher tax bracket. The other big change that happened in 2019 was these retirement plans have now what they call a 10-year rule. When an individual passes and has a retirement account in a 401k or an IRA or a 403b, they have to pass down to the next generation. When they pass down to the next generation, those types of accounts are going to be taxed at their income tax rates of the individuals that are taking those monies out. Before the big change in 2019, inheritance coming from the next generation, they used to be able to take out small chunks of required minimum distributions during their lifetime, and then be able to take out bigger chunks when they're in their retirement. The big change happened now is when somebody inherits an IRA or a 401k or 403b, you have 10 years in which to take all of that money out. And at the end of the 10 years, like it or not, whatever's left in those accounts have to be distributed. And those monies, when they're distributed, are taxed as ordinary income on top of whatever they're else is making. And so, where is coming a problem is in those 10 years, there are usually, a lot of those folks are in their highest earning years. So where mom and dad were thinking, I'm gonna have this little nest egg for my kids, is turning into a big tax burden to the kids because the planning wasn't done prior to the kids receiving those funds. Some of the questions you should be asking your advisors is, how should I be taking more out of my accounts? That's always my probably biggest complaint for most people going in retirement. They're not taking more out of their retirement accounts. Take them out now, use them when you can. Try to fill up the smaller or the lower tax brackets. There's a couple arrows in our quiver that we use. One of them is called a qualified charitable distribution, where you can actually donate monies directly from an IRA account into a charity without having to pay any taxes. You can give stock. When you have non-qualified accounts, and non-qualified accounts meaning non-IRA accounts, and what happens with those, individuals pay taxes along the way, and they usually grow in value. A lot of times folks don't want to cash them in because they don't want to pay a big tax bill. Well, the church doesn't pay a big tax bill because they're not-for-profit, so they would be more than happy to take those stocks and be able to sell them for you where they don't have to pay a tax, and you get a tax deduction for the monies given to the church. The other one is trying to get monies out of the pre-tax accounts into Roth accounts. And this is Roth IRAs and 401ks have been around for about 15 years now. And the beauty of the Roth accounts is you are elected to pay the taxes while you are alive. And now, when you once you get the monies into those Roth IRAs, you don't have to pay any taxes when you withdraw them. And even more importantly, the next generation doesn't have to pay taxes on them when they receive them as well. So we do a lot of planning on trying to get as much of those pre-tax IRAs into those Roth IRA accounts. And kind of going back on the giving is really, really important. What I always hear from a lot of folks is, wow, I didn't know mom and dad had that much money. I wish they would have done more with it. Or I wish we could have had a little bit more up front when we were trying to save for college or trying to save for our own retirement. And also, same way with charities, give while you can. Be able to see the fruits of your labor going to a charitable organization like a church or so forth, so that you can see the benefit that what you have put together. And one of the things too is titling, and I was kind of piggybacking off of the estate planning, but making sure you have your assets titled correctly, and that's always can be a big mistake, where you can create an undue tax burden just because you didn't have the assets titled correctly. I can talk, there's a lot of different conversations I can go on with this, but that's kind of the basics. Thank you.
Well, folks, eventually on the life planning panel, you get to the end. That's the end of life planning. That's where I come in. I'm Chad McGrady. I'm the funeral director on the panel here. Dan led off. He said he's got 3 initial questions for you when he meets with you. I've got 100 when I meet with you, and that's not a joke. I have 100 different things I need to go over with you folks when you come in and see me for it. I need to know stuff that your children may not know if they're going to be in charge. Your spouse may not even know. Do your children know your grandmother's maiden name for the death certificate? Odds are probably not. Do they have access to your social security number, your date of birth, where you were born? They say, well, I think he was born at St. John's. Well, which St. John's was that? Was that one in Cleveland? Was that the one in Westlake now? These are all things that I have to know for just the death certificate alone. And then there's some other planning like Dan talked about as well. What I'm planning is essentially a version of a wedding. The difference with the wedding is you can do a wedding 2, 3, 4 times till you get it right. My job is you got one shot at it, all right? We have one time to get it right. And there's some, levity here, but it's true. And what Dan said is if you have some of this stuff written down ahead of time, it is such a blessing to your family there to have that planned out so they aren't guessing at what they want. Does mom want burial or cremation? I don't know. What if your son says mom wants cremation and your daughter says mom wants burial? What do? We got to get that worked out. If we don't get it worked out, we have to go to probate court at that point. We aren't moving forward with anything for 3 weeks at that point till we get an answer from a judge that says, this is what we're doing here. So I've got some of these around. These are our biographical record guides here. I encourage you to take these home with you and fill them out. These aren't everything that you need for a service, but this is a really good start on what it is. It talks about, all the information we need for the death certificate. Talks about if you were in the military, do you want military honors? Are you a member of any lodges? Are you in a Masonic order or anything like that? Do they want to do a service? Who are all your survivors? Where is your safety deposit box key located at for it? Who is going to do my service? Do I want it at the cemetery? Do I want it at the church? Do I want none of that and just want my cremated remains to be scattered? All this stuff can be written down ahead of time. I'm telling you, when folks come in and they have this planned ahead of time, you can just see the relief. Really the last gift you can give to your loved ones. All I'm asking them is, what day do you want it? What time do you want it? Because we know everything is planned out ahead of time here. There's some other considerations about some stuff, and I think you guys have touched on this, some tax consequences and what if someone goes on to Medicaid? How is this taken care of if there's no funds there? If there are no funds there, the county's gonna take care of you, and they're gonna do it as economically, as efficiently as possible for it. If someone's gonna go on to Medicaid and they plan this ahead of time, you can plan for it, you can pay for it ahead of time. The state does not want to pay to have you buried. They want you to use your funds for that. They want it set up irrevocably so that the government can never come in and touch it, regardless of your assets. If you're on Medicaid, and you have a $10,000 funeral, they aren't touching 1 cent of that for it. If there are excess funds after the fact, they're either going to your estate, or if you were on Medicaid, they're going to essentially the state of Ohio at that point there for it. So all this can be done, can all be structured, it can all be taken care of ahead of time. We sit down, we talk. Usually our meetings are around an hour, 90 minutes or so, just to talk over everything, figure out what you want, figure out how we're gonna get there, make sure your kids know about it, or your spouse knows about it, or your trusted relative knows about it there. If you want to appoint someone to be in charge of your final disposition, your funeral arrangements, you can do that in Ohio. If you have, 2 kids and one is going to do exactly how I want it done, and my son-in-law might not do exactly how I want it done, you want to make sure you have that appointment set up ahead of time. It's one thing that can be done, it's like a will. It cannot be signed by a power of attorney. It can only be signed by you in front of either a notary public or 2 non-blood relative witnesses for it. All of that is something that I can go into, I can sit, I can talk with you, but please take one of these with you today when you go home. It'll give you a real good start on a lot of the stuff that we've talked about here. Thank you.
Well, it was very fortuitous because we did not design the panel like this. They are simply in alphabetical order by their last name. But we started with Reverend Rand and prayer, and we ended with our funeral director, Chad. So it worked out quite conveniently. I call that a God moment. He just took care of that and organized it right away. So what questions do you have for anyone individually? Are there any questions that they kind of planted some seeds and you were wondering to ask Mark?
Curious if the panel has any thoughts. The U.S. estate value is subject to change here next year or so, I think, right? Any rumors or words with a change in administration, what might happen in the future?
All right, I'll give you my answer. All right, I want to hear yours.
Well,
No, go ahead.
You want to go first?
No, go ahead, that's fine.
So if the law, if the way the law is today, if the law is not changed, come January 1, 2026, the federal estate tax exemption amount is going to be reduced by about 50%. So right now, the exemption amount per person is 13.99 million. So just shy of 28 million per married couple. And that'll be reduced in half 1/1/26. It was part of Trump's 2017 Tax Act, and that is currently being talked about to be all extended. And so that is in the House right now. I don't believe the Senate's taken it up yet. But what we're hearing is that that is being proposed as just going through everything getting extended. How long it's going to be extended, we don't quite know yet, but that's what we're being told. So what I've been telling clients that are worried about that change coming January 1, we're kind of waiting until midsummer to see what's happening. If nothing's happening, we're probably going to start talking about maybe doing some planning as if the extension's not going to happen, just so that we're not in a crunch and making a lot of significant, potentially irreversible decisions in a short period of time.
Thank you.
I was going to say, if you look at the increases, both of the increases have been with both parties. During the Obama administration, there were some big increases. With the Trump organization or administration, that was the biggest increase in the exemption. And knowing that they, have control of everything. More likely to be extended. Hopefully they'll make it permanent, and the nice one is that it currently does adjust with inflation, so this would make it a lot easier if we just kind of set it in stone and have adjusted for inflation. So that's what I would predict would happen.
All right, what other questions, thoughts?
We've got one over here.
Don?
This question might surprise some of you, but I have a question about vehicles. And you said something about you have to be sure that your vehicle's in part of your estate. And what happens if you're changing vehicles a lot? You always have to constantly go back and update your estate then?
So what I suggest with vehicles is if they're titled in your name, you can put a beneficiary on.
For each one?
For each one. And so if you currently own cars right now, I would add a beneficiary to it. So you can name a person. If you have a trust, you can name a trust, and then that way the trust can address who gets it and have.
Do you have to specify the car or the vehicle, or just that
It goes right on-
XYZ gets it?
It goes right on, well, it depends. So for the beneficiary form for the car, it goes right on the car title. So each and every car title is gonna have it. But if you name, like if you just name your, if you have a trust, if you just name your trust, then your trust can say, any vehicles I own at my passing go to person X. You could say that. Or if there's specific cars that you wanna go to specific people, you can do that too. I typically, if you have the trust, I kinda like that better, cause you can build in contingencies. And on that beneficiary form, you can't. They're not gonna let you say, well, if this person passed, then this person, then this person. And so you may still go through probate to get those cars to where you want them to go. But if you go to and you have to go to the title bureau, not the license bureau, but if you go to the title bureau with your car title, you can add the benefit. They'll give you the form and you can fill it out and you can put the beneficiary, and then they'll give you a new title. So you'll have a brand new car title that has pay on death to X.
Okay, one little tag onto that, and I won't tie up any more
No, it's
about
okay.
vehicles, but what happens if the vehicle's not paid for?
You don't have the title, so you can't do that.
That who's responsible for the balance?
Well,
Or do they just come and
it's gonna
take it?
depend. I know that there are some car loans, maybe it's through like Ford Motor Credit, I've seen it. If you pass, then they'll extinguish it and you can just turn the car in and they don't owe anything further.
But it doesn't, your estate or whoever doesn't responsible for the balance.
Well, any individuals wouldn't be responsible for the balance. If it goes through, it'll go through the estate, and the estate, if you give the car back, depending upon what your car loan says, like if they say you have to pay the balance, then your estate would pay the balance. So you really have to look at what your car loans say.
Okay, thank you, appreciate that.
Sure there's no more, Don? We're fine to?
I can talk more about vehicles if you'd like. But I think I'm closed now.
Kevin?
Andy, on Roth conversions,
Mm-hmm.
you have to, is that money tied up for a given amount of time?
Yeah, for each year you do a conversion, there's a 5-year waiting period. However, you always have access to the basis tax-free at any time. So even if you did a Roth conversion today of $10,000, and if you need that money tomorrow, you can always get the $10,000 back tax-free, penalty-free, if you're over the age of 59 and a half. Growth is where you would have penalties and taxes.
I think this is to you, Chad. Does, in the paperwork that she brought, whatever, if you don't want is there an extra charge for an autopsy? I mean, you have a choice, don't you?
No. That's the short answer. In Cuyahoga County, if you pass away under what the medical examiner deems suspicious circumstances, and they want to autopsy you, they will autopsy you. A lot of times, so we do a lot with the Greek Orthodox Church, and they are very much against that there. Folks will call up and they'll talk to the medical examiner and the doctor, and they'll say, is there any way that you could do simply a blood draw or something of that nature and not do a full autopsy? And a lot of times they'll bend to that, but if it's a real suspicious circumstance on something, someone dies with a broken bone and they haven't been in care or something, and the medical examiner wants jurisdiction, they're gonna have first right on that for it. So, it's...
What if it's not suspicious?
Well, if it's not suspicious, so say someone was at the nursing facility and they tripped going to the cafeteria and broke their tongue. If you have a broken bone when you pass, the staff has to notify the medical examiner. 9 times out of 10 on something like that, they're just gonna say, no, we don't need to see the person, we release to the funeral home. We'll come out, we'll take the person into our care.
So it's up to the medical examiner?
It's ultimately up to the medical examiner's office determining an autopsy, yeah. And the same, in Cuyahoga County, it's a medical examiner, which is an appointed position. If you live in Avon Lake, it's Lorain County. That's a coroner, it's an elected position. They are doing essentially the same job for it. It's just a difference in the way they're appointed or elected.
Well, now, if you have offered to be a donor, an organ donor, is there an extra charge for taking your organs?
No, that's all taken. So when someone is an organ donor, there's a group called Life Bank here in Cuyahoga County. They're over on Richmond. They're going to take the person into their care, say you pass, and usually this is when someone passes in a controlled setting, what we would call like a hospital or something. If someone passes at home, the chances of you being an organ donor are very low for that. They want this in a controlled setting, maybe a nursing facility with medical staff or something there. Or if you're going to do an organ donation, they're going to take you to their facility, they're going to take care of their donation. It may be you simply donate your corneas, it may be you donate all of your bones or something. It's up to their discretion on that. Certain people have certain things that they can use. You know, if someone's on life support and they know they're going to die, and when they unplug them, they're going to have a lot more opportunity to use those organs for someone, as opposed to someone who died in a nursing facility and then they were brought over to Life Bank for it. They can't use your liver or something in that instance for it. So it's no additional charge or anything from our standpoint on that for it. And you can still, a lot of folks will worry, well, could I still have like an open casket and my loved ones see you after an organ donation? Yes, that's not a problem usually there.
But what if you don't, if you just want to be cremated, okay, and you don't want an urn? So what do you?
You could do an organ donation, exactly.
Yeah, but what do you provide for a person that doesn't want an urn, or?
We use what we would call a temporary container, essentially.
So like a little box?
It's a box, yeah. It comes, you can choose plastic or cardboard, you know, whatever you want for that.
And what do you do with it?
We give it to the family at that point.
What if they don't want it?
That's a good question, actually.
That is a good question.
In Ohio,
Interesting question.
we hold cremated remains for 60 days after someone passes there. If no one comes within 60 days, we can dispose of them by law for it. That means we can bury them, we can scatter the cremated remains, we can hold on to them for it. We actually have a mausoleum we own at a cemetery where we sent out notices to folks like from 1955 or something on through 1975 that never came to pick up their cremated remains. We did not want to scatter them. We didn't feel like that was going to be appropriate. So we took all of them into a mausoleum actually there, and they're housed there on a cemetery ground. If anyone ever comes up, you know, the great-grandchild comes up in 20 years, I can say, yes, I have this, you can get it. It's $100 to open the mausoleum, but then you can have those. So that's what we do, but if you're really thinking, you know, you don't want them, or someone would, we usually offer to scatter in Lake Erie. We do that twice a year.
Is there a
We'll go
charge
out.
for that?
No, we take care of that for it.
Oh.
Unless you wanted to go like, someone wants me to charter a yacht or something, and we're gonna have a party or something. That is a charge, but if I'm doing it at my convenience with my brother-in-law on the boat, then we take care of it.
So you would scatter them?
We would scatter them in Lake
At no
Erie.
charge?
Yeah, there's no charge for that there. But we wanna have that written down ahead of time, you know, so we know that this is what someone wants for it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Marcy, you might want to go to a recycler.
You're right, Don. I think that's a really good idea.
Great questions, great questions. What else?
Chad answered my first question. I didn't know the scattering was legal.
So that is actually, it's legal in most places, but say you wanted to scatter in the metro parks, you're supposed to get the okay from the park rangers. Say you want to go scatter on the golf course, talk to the superintendent there about that, you know, they don't want that right when someone's going to be putting right there or something. So, you need to get permission from where you're doing it. If you're doing it in the lake, you're supposed to go about a mile out. The Coast Guard is really here in Cleveland, that's who we notify. They're really pretty lax about it. They just, you know, allow it.
The second question was, any experience with natural burials?
Yes, lots of that. So that's becoming much more common nowadays. That is where we will, when someone passes away, we'll take them into our care. We have a morgue on site. We'll keep the body below 40 degrees per Ohio law. After 48 hours, the body must be below 40 degrees, or else you have to embalm it here. We'll then schedule with the family, and it's usually 2-3 days after passing, and we'll do the burial there. There's a couple green cemeteries in Ohio. There's a really true green cemetery down in Wilmot, Ohio, which is south of Canton there. It's, the graves are dug by the Amish down there. For $100 more, you can dig the grave yourself, which I never understood. You have to pay to actually do the work, but they'll let you do that, and then you're buried essentially 6 feet under. They're not quite. You're put in either, we use a burial shroud made of natural cotton fibers, or we use a bamboo casket, which is essentially a hand-woven, it looks like a big basket, essentially, that you're put in. We want to bury you in natural fibers, you know, if we can. We don't want to use like a rayon or a polyester or something like that. We don't want any metal there with it. And then after we're done, your grave is marked by GPS, or you can get a stone there and they'll engrave like an actual stone, not like a cubic gravestone, an actual rounded stone for it. Additionally, there's a cemetery in Cleveland called Riverside that has a natural burial section there. They're down on West 25th, kind of by Metro Hospital there. They have one area where you can do a natural burial. That's the closest to us. Lastly is you can do what we would call kind of a hybrid burial there. If you had space at Lakewood Park's the closest one to us here. You could be buried in what we call a bottomless outer burial container. So it's essentially, it's still a concrete form as required by their cemetery regulations, but you're actually in contact with the dirt there, and you'll actually, you know, in theory within 6 months or so, you're down to just bones. Within 2 years under natural burial, you're almost completely gone.
I have a number of documents, and I'd like to, I assume it's either with Mr. Henton or man with you. Which one would be better? Afterwards, if I could set up a time to come in and see you and get a reality check with these documents.
I'm assuming estate documents?
End of life.
Okay.
I'll see you after the meeting.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, were there any other questions?
Yes.
Okay, Marcia?
As a lawyer, and you do a lot of these the power of attorney, all that, you know, how, as an attorney, and you have done these for a lot of people, do you call them after a year or something, say we need to update, or is there any changes to, because I haven't heard from my lawyer, I have to call her. you know? I mean, is that something that I have to keep up on?
I would say for a lot of people, as life changes, we get a lot of calls from people, like right now, kind
For
of.
first time, you mean? Or,
Well, just any time. I mean, a lot of times, we may not hear from people for a couple years, or 10 years, or sometimes 15 years, and then they come back and say, oh, we have updates. Sometimes we will contact people when there are significant changes, like within the last year or so, we've been contacting people that we haven't heard from, and just say, hey, haven't heard from you in a while, things may change, plus there's this tax law that potentially was changing, and, you know, before Trump was elected, people thought that this was gonna happen, and so we were starting to plan for that.
so you keep up on that kind of then? Like
We try to. I mean, I mean, I'll be honest with you, it's hard because there's just so much going on and there's so much changing that I mean, I would say if nobody's contacted you, I would look at your documents. If you've had no life changes, I would still look at them like every 3 to 5 years, just to make sure that things are still how you want them.
I have a question about DNRs. How do you let whoever, I mean, if you, in an accident or something, how does the squad or the tech, you know, the medical people, how do they know that you have a DNR? I mean,
Yeah, so, well, I guess there's a couple documents with that. So when you do a DNR, you do that with your physician.
Yes.
And because they go over all the situations that could arise and when you don't want to be resuscitated. There's also another document that I can do for people, which is called a living will. And the living will is your statement that if you're in a permanently unconscious state or
Right.
terminal condition, meaning death is imminent, there's no chance of recovery, so you basically started that dying process, you don't want extraordinary measures to keep you alive. So that's a different document than a DNR. So a lot of people may have a living will and not a DNR. You would know you have a DNR if you've sat down with your physician.
Yes, they ask you that. When you go to the hospital, they'll ask you if you have a DNR.
Right.
So if you when you have your upcoming surgery, they are going to ask you, do you have a DNR?
it's hanging on my refrigerator.
Right,
Yeah,
so that's.
How are they gonna know? I mean,
You have to bring it with
What should I do
you.
with it?
You have to bring it with you.
And it'll be.
It should be
part-
in your physician's.
Yeah, and it'll be part of your medical record too, because if you've done it with your physician, it
Yes.
would be part of your medical record.
Oh, okay.
So if they take you in by a squad and then they key you into the system, they should be able to pull up your medical records.
Are you, when you say it's in the system, are you talking about it's in my chart?
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
yes.
Mm-hmm.
It'll be any of the charts, so if it's a
Right.
my chart from UH or my chart from any of them,
Right.
it will come right up and it will say that you are a DNR.
I'm done. Go ahead.
I was in a setting similar to this not long ago. Someone asked that question, and the reason she asked is because her grandson got in an automobile accident out of state. And he did not want to be resuscitated, but no one knew. And someone in the room said, and so I'm not saying you should do this, but I'm understanding that through the Ohio motor vehicles, there is a way that you should go online and indicate that, or when you go to have your license updated, indicates, because if you're in an accident out of state, or they were using the example of the snowbirds driving to Florida, who might have a problem, because they're older like us, that whoever comes to see you, hopefully they would find your driver's license, and that's the first thing they'd contact anyway to know who to contact, and they would see that. Same
It's
thing.
on your license?
There's
You can have-
something
Yes.
within the Ohio,
You should have
presumably.
that. You should have it on your license, and it'll say if you're an organ donor
Organ donor was
as
the
well,
other
and
part of it.
it will ask you
But the DNR question, because she said he, there was some issue with the grandson that did not want to be resuscitated, and then he was a young person, and so it's just something everybody think about and say, oh yeah, do I have that on my license? Do I understand that? What's going on?
Frank?
Two quick comments. My parents were in the service, and there are some benefits to when you pass away that you get because you're in the service. One thing I know is I believe you get a headstone, and part of the headstone question I have was that they give you the headstone, but you have to have somebody engrave the date and all that on it. It just doesn't magically happen. And I assumed wrongly that the funeral place would do that, and that's not the case. Secondly, the situation about having somebody passing away overseas is quite a difficult process to bring the person back and deal with all that stuff. And I don't know if there's some way to talk about that or if that's important or not.
Mm-hmm.
But I had a relative that passed away while they were on vacation in Europe, and his wife spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to get things organized and get the person back.
So first part, the headstone and burial benefits. So if they're honorably discharged, you're entitled to a headstone from the U.S. government VA that can go in a private cemetery. Additionally, you're entitled to the folding and playing of taps, folding of the flag, playing of taps at the cemetery, or a venue of your choosing. Thirdly, you're also entitled to grave space at a national cemetery. Closest one to us is Ohio Western Reserve National Cemetery in Rittman, Ohio. It's about a 50-minute drive or so down here. It's where I-71 and I-76 intersect, essentially. All you need for that is the honorable discharge. They take care of the grave space, the headstone, and the outer burial container there. All free of charge for the veteran and the veteran's spouse there, and any adult dependent children. So if there's someone who passes away when they're an adult dependent child, you're still in college or something, and your child passed away, they can go there as well. Once you age out of that, which is like 24, and you become, the way the Veterans Administration views it, as a singular adult, then you're not entitled to go to Ohio Western Reserve unless you serve there. The second part about someone passing overseas, extremely difficult there to handle that. We work with an Albanian community here in Cleveland a lot. We will often send someone back to Albania for burial there. It's a minimum 2-week process alone from us, and that's working in the United States to get to Albania. And our stuff is very good here in the United States. If you pass over in Albania to get back to the United States, you're looking at 6 weeks or so there. There is something that's offered that's called a travel insurance. It's $495, I think, if you pass away 75 miles away from your legal residence there. So if you live in Cleveland and you snowboard in Florida and you pass away in Florida, they'll take care of all the costs, they'll take care of all of the documents. If you pass away in Europe, they'll do it. What they won't do is if you pass away in Uzbekistan and your body's being held for ransom or something, they will not deal with that there. But anything where it's a normal circumstance, they will pay for the entire cost and they will arrange for everything to get you back there for it. So whenever we do someone with a pre-funding now, this just came out in the last year or two, there we'll always offer that to folks if they want to do that. And a lot of folks, like when they are snowbird, will actually take us up on that because it's rare that it happens, I'll be honest, that you pass away 75 miles away from your legal residence, you know, but it does happen, so it's nice.
Is that a
nice
one-time fee? You pay
One-time fee.
$495 for this insurance?
One-time fee, yep, it's done.
All right, we are approaching the hour, so if our panelists are here to answer questions for you, they're happy to meet with you. Their cards are there. Any last comments? Any final thoughts? I thank you all for coming, and I thank you for the panelists for making this happen. Thank you so much.